This is ecoTEC's ecoTEC Roundup show from Aotearoa's first and only climate-positive certified renewable electricity provider. We only source from wind, hydro and solar, and we are the leading supplier of electricity to electric vehicles in Aotearoa. Switch today at ecotecity.co.nz. Welcome back to another roundup of news from the world of clean cars and green energy. Thanks for joining me. I'm sure by now that you know the Kiwi EV marketplace has been facing a bit of an uphill battle thanks to the ridiculous pay-per-click tariff on all EVs and elimination of incentives. But if you are able to buy a new EV right now and you're in Aotearoa, you might find yourself nabbing a truly incredible bargain as some automakers lean heavily into massive deals designed to sell excess stock. After enjoying a market share of more than 50% in December, companies are now looking to throw some serious discounts your way, with some dealerships marking up discounts as high as 50% off official list price. Sure, you will still have to file and pay RUCs every month, but if you go electric and you pair it with ecoTEC's amazing climate-positive renewable electricity, you too can get the EV grin. Unless you've been under a rock for the past 6 months, you'll know that both European and North American countries are readying new tariffs on imported Chinese-made EVs. You might also know that in the last few weeks we've seen non-Chinese automakers reiterate why tariffs are needed and heard from Chinese automakers readying ways around those tariffs. This week it looks like those two worlds might collide after reporting from multiple news outlets suggests that Audi, whose production facility in Vorst, Belgium, is considering selling the facility to Chinese company NIO. Audi had planned to use the facility to increase production of its Q8 e-tron, but decided earlier this year it didn't need the extra capacity. It would give Volkswagen AG extra money and NIO a way to avoid tariffs. Sticking with Chinese automakers, BYD is known around the world for its low-cost EVs and its rapid capture of certain parts of the EV marketplace. It, like other Chinese firms, is looking at ways around European import tariffs for passenger cars, but has also just launched not one or two, but an entire new range of battery electric commercial vehicles. While BYD is known best in most markets for its cars, its commercial vehicle business is huge globally, with BYD buses and trucks already sold in much of the world. The new commercial range for Europe includes the E-Valley, LCV with a 3.5 or 4.25 metric ton payload, a new yard tractor, which I should note is designed for shipping yards, not your garden, a cab-over tractor unit for medium distance haul, and a 7.5 metric ton fixed axle truck for urban delivery duties. One of the most common fears we hear from would-be EV drivers is what happens if their EV battery pack dies after a few years of ownership, requiring a costly replacement. Like many in the industry, we've done our best to educate people about the reality that most EV battery packs outlive the vehicle they're placed in, and new data from fleet management company Geotab hammers that point home. In 2019, data from its massive fleet showed that EV batteries were degrading on average by about 2.3% per year, and this year, the rate of degradation in newer EVs is far less, at 1.8% on average, with some models suffering just 1% of average degradation per year. I should note, however, that these figures are averaged out. It's normally usual for an EV to suffer its most noticeable battery degradation in its first year of ownership, after which it tends to suffer negligible battery degradation for the remainder of its life. It's no secret that vehicles are getting larger and larger, and that includes EVs. And while the auto industry likes to sell larger vehicles as being safer, they're really not safe for other road users. Safety advocates have been worrying about increasing hood sizes for years, as well as recent increases in pedestrian deaths in the US. And it shows us that something needs to be done to stop the oversized, pedestrian-unfriendly vehicle craze. Now, after successful legislative efforts in the US, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is working on a new proposed set of rules designed to force automakers to build vehicles that are safer for pedestrians. It would impose new tests focused on pedestrian head impact and safety. About bloody time. When Fisker entered into bankruptcy protection earlier this year, we heard lots of horror stories about lightly danged vehicles being written off due to part supply issues and worse. When it entered into bankruptcy protection, Fisker promised that it would cover warranty repairs, but reporting earlier this week suggested that owners might have to end up paying for certain repairs. Fisker has now publicly modified its FAQ page to reiterate that recalls requiring a physical inspection and potential repairs will be covered by the firm at no cost to owners. But this is hardly surprising. As far as I am aware, not doing this would have resulted in potential legal action. But at least it's good to know that Fisker owners can keep their cars on the road even if the company is struggling. Watch this space. It's well known that the Chinese auto industry, especially electric vehicles, is a massive threat to Western brands, and it's one of the reasons why large tariffs are now being proposed. Now, in a new interview with the Wall Street Journal, Ford CEO Jim Farley is calling China's EV industry a quote-unquote existential threat to Ford and the industry in general. Those who have been following in the industry will not be surprised by this, and inquiring minds might want to know why Jim Farley hadn't realised this earlier. But his trip to China earlier this year, where he test drove some Chinese-made EVs and realised the edge that those brands had on Ford, is rumoured to be one of the reasons why Ford suddenly switched from making large, heavy EVs and to promising more affordable, smaller vehicles instead. But if it works, good. Renault is well known for taking precious iconic models and giving them a Restomod EV treatment for an auto show, and Renault's just about to do that at the Paris Motor Show. Enter the R17 electric Restomod X Ora Ito. Developed in collaboration with French designer Ora Ito, this Restomod takes the Renault 17 and adds a little nip and tuck here and there to improve road holding and bring its styling into the 21st century. I'm certainly not a fan of the body design or indeed the wheels, although it certainly managed to capture what maybe a designer in the 70s might have imagined a futuristic EV would look like, but hey, it's not likely to ever make production. But that said, I do love seeing a classic car given a modern twist and all-electric drivetrain. There is only one question I have for Renault though. When will you start offering actual resto mods for your most iconic models? I would love an OG all-electric de cheveux. If you're old enough, you might remember the time when it was common for cigarette companies to advertise everything everywhere, including on television and in magazines, with no warnings about the consequences to your health from smoking. In the last 30 years, we've thankfully seen some bans in some countries aimed at curtailing tobacco advertising. And now the city of The Hague in the Netherlands is the first city in the world to do the same with fossil fuels. It's just passed a local ordinance that bans fossil fuel suppliers, vacations, air travel, and ICE vehicles from being advertised. It's a step in the right direction, and it helps The Hague towards its goal of becoming climate neutral by 2030. Well done for being a world leader. From fantastic pro-EV policy now to some pretty terrible choices from the Conservatives, and official news from Kiwi lobbying group Better NZ Trust, which has just collated figures from the Ministry of Transport about the effect of killing EV subsidies. It calculated that thanks to the change in policies towards EVs at the start of this year, basically the removal of purchase incentives and introduction of RUCs, there will likely be as many as 58,000 fewer EVs on the roads of Aotearoa in a decade's time, versus the numbers predicted had the Conservative government opted to leave the policies of the previous administration alone. It's so maddening and frustrating to see pollution being rewarded through inaction, and as Better NZ Trust says, in addition to nearly 60,000 fewer EVs on the road, Kiwis face dealing with 2 megatons more tailpipe emissions. It is so frustrating. Write to your politician. Before we get to the last 2 stories, I have a quick question. Are you in the market for a new EV? If you are, and you live in Aotearoa, you should totally check out our very own buyer's guide at ecotricity.co.nz. It's packed with all the information you need to pick a car that's right for you, and includes plenty of details about available vehicles, daily life with an EV, and so much more. So follow the link below and start your journey today. Despite being the #1 EV pickup on sale in the US right now, it's fair to assume, at least based on the vehicles I see here in the US, that most Tesla Cybertrucks aren't given a very hard life. But 2 Tesla Cybertrucks have just successfully completed a true adventure truck-worthy adventure by travelling from Florida to the Arctic Ocean and back, covering a total of 11,000 miles at 17,700 kilometres. The 2 trucks were lightly modified with some custom bits from Unplugged Performance, but were otherwise pretty standard, and ended up relying on both Tesla's supercharger network and some newly installed Level 2 Tesla destination chargers on the Dempster Highway in Canada. It is really good to see someone using an electric truck for an appropriate reason rather than just being a trophy truck that's a commuter vehicle. And finally, Norway has long been the world leader in EV adoption, thanks in part to some very generous incentives and the early EV advocacy work of a certain band you might have heard of by the name of Aha. We've seen EV sales grow and grow in the last 2 decades, and now the overwhelming majority of new cars sold in the nation are electric. But last month, another milestone was passed: the fact that there are now more EVs on the road than there are petrol-powered vehicles. Sadly, diesel vehicles still outnumber EVs by just a little bit, but I have no doubt that will soon change, and I'm sure that many of you feel the same way. So if someone decides to jump in your social media account and tell you EVs are a total and utter failure, you can just quietly point them to Norway, where EV owning is preferred to filling up with petrol. And on that note, we are done for the day. Before I go though, do make sure you've hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on the latest in EV news from the channel. And if you haven't switched yet, it's high time to switch to Outnumber's first and only climate positive certified renewable electricity provider. It is super easy to make the switch, and in doing so, you'll help the nation wean itself off dirty energy and onto clean green power that will keep the land beautiful for generations to come. I'll be back next week as usual, and in the meantime, do check out other videos on this channel, including from the lovely Gavin Kiwi EV Shoebridge. Thanks for joining me. I'm Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield. Have an amazing week. Kakite! See you next time.